Silesia, the Beskydy legend. Tess, August 2000. Tereska, a small, skinny, and pale girl with black hair and eyes as dark as a raven's, stared at the strange thing. But no matter how hard she stared, it didn't make any sense. Right in the middle of the housing estate, where there was usually a roadway, yawned instead a field about 2 meters wide. From the ground floor window of her block of flats, she looked out at a T-shaped intersection. The intersection was the main artery of the estate, normally full of people walking and cars passing through. Now, there was a field. Heavy clouds stretched across the dark sky above it. But higher still, above the clouds, the sky was cloudless and sky blue, the same as everywhere else on this hot August day. It was almost as if someone had installed a gigantic painting of a foreign landscape right in front of her eyes. Cars that passed through the image disappeared into nothingness for a brief moment, before emerging again. By the time Tereska remembered to breathe, the vision had vanished. She was astonished at how indifferent people outside seemed to be. None of the passing drivers jerked their steering wheels in panic to avoid the sudden apparition on the road. The pedestrians didn't even glance toward the spot where it had appeared. Mothers calmly stretched cloth diapers over stroller canopies to shield their babies from the sharp sunlight, though that only turned the inside into a hot furnace. Dog walkers shouted at their pets that wanted to roll in the grass or eat something off the ground. The man who had just come out of their toilet climbed into a car, favorite parked outside the building, and drove off without the slightest interest. Whatever it was, it seemed that no one but Tereska had seen it. Before she saw that strange thing, the Sunday morning had gone on as usual. She walked out of the children's room, and the stale stench of alcohol and cigarette smoke from the previous night hit her nose. The floor was littered with papers, trash, chewing gum, crumbs, and sticky stains from spilled drinks. Some of it was long-standing grime. Some had appeared just the night before. She opened the windows in the living room and kitchen to let in fresh air. Into garbage bags, she threw cans and bottles, and into a bucket, she dumped the ash from overflowing ashtrays. When the toilet flushed, she jumped in fright, the bag and bucket rattling. She hadn't expected her mom to be up this early, but from the toilet, plastered with posters of palm beaches, came not her mom, but a man. She froze. She had never seen him before. His face was covered in stubble, and he wore carrot-shaped jeans pulled almost up to his belly button. When he noticed Tereska, he muttered, "Hey," and stumbled out of the apartment. She didn't reply, but she noticed he hadn't washed his hands. Out of curiosity, she peeked out the window to see where he was headed. And that was when she saw the strange image, which started at road level and seemed to stretch all the way up to the 3rd floor of their building. The confused girl tried to convince herself she wasn't completely losing her mind. She searched for some natural explanation for what she had seen. Too realistic for an optical illusion. Too symmetrical for a meteorological phenomenon. None of that would explain why no one else outside had noticed it. Perhaps the sun's rays had blinded the others at that exact moment. But in that case, surely the drivers would have hit the brakes rather than drive on blindly. The only explanation left was that the vision was visible from just one single spot, the place where Tereska stood. She hoped she would learn more if she went outside. She grabbed the bag of bottles and the bucket of ash and stepped out. Although she had planned to take the trash far from their building, she changed her mind and went straight to the bins in front of the house. She tossed bottle after bottle into the glass container, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't scared of the loud crash when they hit the bottom. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead intense expectation of something that might clarify the event. But she was unlucky. Disappointed, she went back home and after a while of wandering aimlessly, forced herself to think of something else. She checked the handwritten list of today's tasks that helped her temporarily tame her wild thoughts. She crossed off. Throw out the trash, go as far from the building as possible, don't be lazy. She hadn't followed the instruction exactly, but under the circumstances, she figured it didn't matter. Then only 2 tasks remained. Look for job ads, and do the laundry, and don't forget to take it out of the washing machine. She stuffed all the laundry, dark and light together, into the washing machine and poured in Palmex detergent, which had hardened so much that only big clumps of powder fell from the box. While the machine filled with water, Tereska sat on the carpet in the living room, leaning her back against the shabby old couch. With a pen that was running out of ink, she circled all the job ads in the classifieds that seemed suitable for her mom. For the last few, she pressed hard because the pen was almost empty. She rummaged deep in the gap of the couch and among crumbs, wrappers, and scraps of paper, dug out another pen. This one was only half used. While the Tatramat washing machine bounced on the linoleum in the bathroom, she wrote down on a sheet of paper the names of the chosen companies, their addresses, phone numbers, and job titles. Thanks to this, her mum would just have to pick up the phone and apply for a job as a school cleaner, cashier at Jednota, factory worker at the car plant, or helper in the dairy. When she had finished her tasks, she went to have breakfast. From the bag, she dug out the last 2 rolls, and from the fridge, she found an expired strawberry yogurt. As she dipped the roll into the yogurt, she watched the recording of Call the Director that she had taped the day before. During the program, she absently glanced at the shelf above the TV and immediately noticed that something was wrong. Her beloved wooden angel figurine lay on its back with a broken-off wing beside it. Tereska sighed resignedly. Not only had those people who were there last night eaten most of the rolls, but they had also somehow managed to mutilate her guardian. She carried the figurine and the wing into her room, but since she didn't have glue at hand, she left it on the table and added a note to her to-do list. Fix the angel. She went back to the TV, but only stared blankly at it until she realized she wasn't really registering the pie charts, proving that Nova had once again beaten CT in the ratings. The morning's experience crept back into her mind, spreading like a spider's web. She also felt the urge to check on her mom. She knew it was pointless. What could possibly have happened to her in the bedroom? But it was an instinct bred over years, and besides, she wanted someone to talk to. She quietly opened the bedroom door, only to see that the bed was empty, apart from a crumpled blanket. She didn't know whether her mom had left during the night or early in the morning, whether she was at someone's place, at the pub, or lying somewhere on a bench, pissed and puked on. With a stabbing feeling in her stomach, she turned off the TV, quickly got dressed, brushed her teeth, and set off outside to look for her. Fefin, June 2001. Fefin, a medium-height, skinny blonde boy with a sunken chest, believed there was some miraculous trick that could turn his gloomy, joyless life around, if only he could discover it. When he found a men's magazine behind his bed, a forgotten treasure left by his older brother, he came across a strange article full of tips on how to captivate any girl and confuse her mind. What intrigued him most was a technique called negation. The principle was simple: insult or belittle a girl so that she felt inferior, making the man who did this suddenly seem more attractive than before. The trick supposedly worked even on unattractive men. The only small problem was that Fefin was only 12. He could barely speak to girls normally, let alone use clever techniques. But he didn't give up and practiced diligently. He slicked back his greasy, medium-length hair, tucked it behind his ear, and continued his training. "Got a pimple on your forehead, did you know?" he said to his reflection in the mirror, imagining he was speaking to Veronica, a girl from school he had a platonic crush on. He practiced in the hallway right next to the apartment door. He picked up the magazine again and read step number 2. Stand sideways to her, so she doesn't feel like hunted prey. He turned sideways to the mirror and tried to lower his voice to make it sound deeper. He pictured himself as Lorenzo Lamas from the show Renegade. He closed his eyes, pointed his finger, checked his posture in the mirror, and said, "What's this growing here, kitty?" No sooner had he said it than the apartment intercom rang almost next to his ear, and Fefin jumped in fright. When he calmed down, he held the receiver to his ear. "Come help us carry the bags upstairs. We stopped by Hypernova on the way," he heard his father's deep baritone. Quickly, he hid the magazine under his bed, slipped on his shoes, and ran downstairs to help his parents. Meanwhile, they had already unloaded the groceries from the red Felicia and carried the bags to the entrance. Each bag bore Hypernova's blue and yellow logo. In the summer heat, Fefin was sweating from the quick movement, so he first wiped his wet forehead and waved the bottom of his shirt several times to catch some cool air. Then he slid his fingers under the handles of 4 shopping bags, 2 in each hand. He lifted them, walked a few meters, and stopped in front of the elevator shaft, which was streaked with spittle from top to bottom. Before he could set the bags down and press the long, protruding button, his father sent him one of his parental admonitions. A healthy boy should move, not ride in the elevator, he heard as his father headed toward the stairs. Knowing there was no point arguing, he sighed and started climbing the stairs to the 5th floor with his load. "You should have gone with us. It was fun," his mother panted heavily, climbing the stairs behind him and holding her narrow, long skirt. She unbuttoned only the top 2 buttons of her collared blouse to avoid revealing anything from her neckline. "Trosok brought sandwiches, and Sikorka baked excellent Misha bars, right, Jinzik?" she added, addressing her husband with the last words. "Yes, they were good," his father shouted over Fefin's head in response, also unbuttoning his brown blazer, matching his worn brown shoes and mustard-colored tie. "And Simonka and Saka were there too. Do you remember them?" his mother continued, directing the question at her son. "I don't know. Probably not," Fefin replied absent-mindedly. He felt his sweaty shirt sticking to his body. 3 more floors to go. "How come you don't know? You played together as kids," his mother persisted. And Fefin wondered why she had to ask now, when everyone was barely catching their breath. "Okay, fine. I probably do remember them," he said, hoping to end the conversation. For a moment it worked, and there was peace, until halfway up the 4th floor. "And everyone kept asking about you. Where's Filipek? We haven't seen him for so long." They were very sad, and looked forward to seeing you too. His mother began again, near the final stretch. It was admirable that she could still talk, gasping for breath between sentences. He managed in reply. When they arrived at the apartment, Fefin was already carrying 2 large wet wheels under his arms. He would have liked nothing more than to go straight to his room and collapse on the bed. But that's not how things were done at home. He removed his slippers, placed them in the shoe rack, washed his hands, and went to help his parents put away the groceries in the fridge and pantry. "Jitka, when we discussed this, didn't we agree he has to understand this isn't about sandwiches and cakes or childhood friends and other nonsense?" his father explained to his mother, gesturing with a package of sausages in one hand and a can of beans in the other. His mother went silent. Fefin saw her nervously clutch a pallet of Danone yogurts. She noticed Fefin enter the kitchen and signaled her husband with her eyes. His father turned to him. "Son, how should I put this? We just need to have a serious talk with you. The thing is, Philippi, your mum and I, and the whole organization, believe that you understand your responsibilities to all of us. At the same time, we're worried that you've somewhat forgotten them. By not attending the program, you undermine our trust. Your lax attitude betrays the organization, us, and most of all, yourself." "And our Lord," his mother added quietly. "Yes, exactly as your mother says. You're betraying our Lord, and that's what matters most," his father corrected, placing a can of white beans in the pantry. Fefin's face burned. Deep down, he wished this strange conversation, actually a monologue, would end soon. Silently, he put away the salami and cheese in the fridge. "Can you say something about what I just outlined regarding our concerns about your, approach to responsibility?" his father asked. Fefin had no idea how to respond. His normally regular dad had suddenly turned into an old-fashioned preacher, using a vocabulary Fefin barely understood. But he understood the purpose. His parents and the other congregation members were upset that he hadn't attended meetings for at least a year. So he lowered his eyes and stayed silent. That seemed enough for his father, who gently patted him on the shoulder with a pack of sausages. "You're a good boy. You just sometimes need guidance back on the right path," he added encouragingly. Pleased with himself, he left lunch to his wife and went to the bathroom to read Nedelni Pravo. After preparing a quick meal, his mother came to Fefin's room. She placed a hot bowl of soup and a spoon on his desk. From her expression, he sensed another stage of an uncomfortable conversation awaited. "You don't want to live in truth anymore, Philipek?" she asked cautiously, sitting on his bed. "It's not about that," he replied, stirring the soup while blowing on it. "Then what is it about?" "Well, people look at us weirdly because we're witnesses, and everyone laughs at us." "Who's everyone?" "Like the kids from the housing estate." He sipped the soup. It was good, but that doesn't matter. "Why do you care what strangers think, Felipe? You should ignore anyone who isn't a sister or brother in the truth." She frowned, wiping a drop on the table. "I know it's hard to ignore them," she added kindly, making a motion as if to pat him, then changed her mind and neatly folded the cloth. "Mum, I'm tired of hearing, 'There goes Mr. Watchtower, ha 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 ha.'" His mother looked up in surprise and widened her eyes at her son. "Who says that?" "The kids from the housing estate, from school. Should Dad talk to them so they leave you alone?" He didn't answer immediately, just ate. Then he considered his reply. "It's not so much about them leaving me alone. I want them to think I'm okay, that I could maybe be their friend too." Fefin's voice faltered slightly at the end. "Why would you want to be friends with such people? You have friends in the congregation," his mother asked. "Yeah, except the people at the program are kind of awkward," Fefin said bluntly. A silence fell. Fefin didn't think he said anything wrong, so his mother's next words hit him off guard. "But we go to the program too. Are we awkward too, in your opinion?" she asked, tapping the folded cloth irritably. Fefin blushed. He froze, suddenly at a loss for words. Time passed, and he remained silent, staring at the picture of a goose at the bottom of his empty plate. This wasn't what he wanted. He didn't mean it like that. Or did he? He loved his parents. He wished he could explain. But how, when he himself didn't know? He realized the silence had stretched too long, as if each pause underscored his previous words. "Ah," his mother said finally sharply. When he glanced at her, he saw an angry expression. She got up, took his empty plate and spoon, leaving the door open. He knew then that he was in trouble, that he had upset her, and that he had hurt her. He definitely knew she didn't deserve it. Tess, August 2000. "Another beer?" asked the bartender, eyeing the regular who was staring blankly at his empty pint glass. The man hadn't even nodded yet, and the bitter foam was already pouring into the glass, adorned with the face of the Slavic god Radagast. With a single glance, Tereska scanned the room. Heavy curtains kept the sunlight out, but also added to the stale air. The bartender noticed her immediately. "She hasn't been here," he shouted to her, not even needing to ask why she had come. Tereska thanked him and walked out, past the slot machines with flashing images of plums, watermelons, and cherries. The sign above the entrance read, "At the Old Fool." Among the places where her mum usually lingered, this housing estate pub, just 5 minutes from their home, was usually a safe bet. Still hopeful, she headed straight to the nearby non-stop bar, which didn't differ much from the dive down the street. The same green tablecloths, heavy glass ashtrays, and slot machines would hardly suggest that this was where a wealthier clientele gathered. The moment she stepped inside, she saw the place was deserted, save for a lone waitress. The barmaid looked at her indifferently while polishing glasses. Tereska backed out and stood outside for a long while, thinking about where else to go. She was starting to get nervous that she hadn't found her mother in either of the two usual spots. Then she remembered once visiting a friend with her mum in the apartment block just across from the bar. It was the tallest block in the whole estate, so full of flats, it needed two separate entrances. She reached the building and hesitated in front of it, unsure whether to try the left or the right entrance. Finally, she chose the left. She was lucky. On the buzzers, she quickly spotted a name she often heard shouted by guests at their place. "Hey, Karas! Come here, Karas! Karas, you bastard!" She pressed the button, and a drowsy, hoarse male voice crackled through the intercom. "What?" Leaning close to the microphone, she said, "Hello, Mr. Karas. Would my mum happen to be at your place right now?" "What?" There was silence for a moment. Then, "For fuck's sake, go bother someone else at this hour." A long rasping and scratching followed, as if he were angrily trying to slam the handset back into place, but couldn't manage it. She checked the time on her watch. It was 1 in the afternoon. She sat on the steps in front of the building for 15 minutes, staring at the passers-by, and then rang again. This time, a hoarse female voice answered. "Yeah? I just wanted to ask if my mum's there." "And who are you?" "Her daughter." "Oh, for God's sake, what's your name?" I asked. "Teresa." "Stupid girl. What's your last name?" "Oh, Tomankova." "Your mum's name is Ivana?" "Yes." "All right then. Wait a minute." The woman yelled at the man in the flat, still holding the receiver. "Carol, some girl's calling, wants to know if Ivana's still here." "I'll check." "Yeah, she is. I'll wake her up," came the man's distant voice. Then the woman spoke into the receiver again. "She'll be down in a moment," and hung up. It took another 10 minutes before the entrance door opened. Her mum appeared, pale and trembling. When she saw Tereska, she clasped her daughter's hand in both of hers. She didn't look her in the eye. "Let's go home, sweetheart," she rasped, and with stiff, jerky steps started walking toward their flat. Tereska followed right behind, ready to support her at any moment. In the end, it wasn't necessary. Her mum managed to walk the few streets on her own. She looked utterly exhausted, and as soon as Tereska unlocked the flat, she dragged herself into the bedroom and collapsed on the bed. Her daughter took off her shoes and closed the door. She felt relieved that her mom was safe at home. She forgot all about the laundry that had finished by then. Maybe she would have remembered it if the phone hadn't rung just then. She picked up the receiver and held it to her ear with helpless resignation. Her grandmother's sharp voice came through the line. "So, what did you eat today?" she asked. She always went straight to the point. Tereska thought of the rolls with yogurt. "We had chicken paprikash," she answered, impatiently twirling the phone cord around her finger. "And what's for dinner?" "Soup." "What kind of soup?" "Chicken." "Your mom made broth." "Yeah." "Yes." "And where is your mom now anyway?" "She's not feeling well, so she went to lie down." There was a long silence on the other end. "I see." Tereska knew that unless she patched up that answer immediately, she risked her grandmother showing up within the hour, conducting a swift inspection of the flat, dragging her mom out of bed, yelling at her for ages, and finally pointing at Tereska without even looking at her and hissing, "I've had enough of you. That girl is coming with me." Then Tereska would burst into tears. Her grandmother, muttering, "Ungrateful little brat," would storm out, slamming the door behind her. And the following Sunday, she'd call again to check in. And if Tereska or her mom didn't give the right answers, the whole thing would repeat itself almost word for word. "She was throwing up all morning. Must have eaten some bad salami," Tereska reported quickly, as if it were true. "She didn't have diarrhea too, did she?" "Oh yes, terrible diarrhea," Tereska confirmed. "All right," said her grandmother. Then she started asking what time they went to bed now, when they got up, and what they did all day since Mum wasn't working, and Tereska still had her summer holidays, and other such things. Once she had learned what she needed, she said goodbye with the assurance that she would call again next Sunday. Tereska sighed in relief. She hung up the receiver and went to wake her mum so she could reassure her with the news that the inspection wouldn't come today. "Mum, Mum," she whispered into her ear until her mother began to stir in bed. She gave a consumptive cough and half opened her eyes. "What is it, kitten?" she rasped and reached out to pull her closer. Her daughter climbed in beside her, and they lay for a while in each other's arms. Mom smelled of smoke and stale alcohol, but she was used to that. "Grandma called, but it went fine," she reported. "Great," Mom said, and began to breathe heavily again, as if slipping back into sleep. "Today, I saw something strange outside the window," Tereska continued, eager to tell her about her day's experience. "Really? Tell me about it." She heard her mother's voice, fading, as though into the distance. "But you're sleeping," the girl whispered. "No, I'm not," Mom muttered drowsily, but moments later, snoring could be heard. Disappointed, she wriggled out of her embrace. She went to the kitchen, boiled water in the kettle, and poured it over instant noodles. Then she emptied in the packet of chicken flavoring and the packet of oil. When she finished the soup, she sat tensely in the kitchen, feeling like she might burst if she didn't tell someone what she had seen today. At last, she couldn't resist any longer. She slipped on her slippers, closed the door of their ground floor flat, and stepped into the elevator. Fefin, June 2001. Fefin sat at the desk in his room, trying to solve math problems. On Monday, They were supposed to write a quarterly test, the last big exam at the end of the school year. He was good at counting, but sometimes he got lost in his thoughts. He felt sorry for having upset and offended his mother. He would have to make it up to her again, and if he found the courage, even apologize. More and more often, his gaze wandered out the window. Outside, a pleasant, mild breeze began to stir, bringing fresher evening air through the open window into his room. Down by the entrance of the opposite apartment block, he saw a group of teenage boys and girls. They were sitting on the ground and on the railing, and at least one of them was smoking a cigarette. Their talk and laughter echoed loudly between the buildings, but he couldn't make out individual words. Fefin stood up from his chair and moved as close to the open window as possible, being careful not to be seen from outside. If they noticed he was secretly trying to listen to them, he'd die of shame. Sometimes he caught a few words, but the group down there was talking about people and events he didn't know. Without context, their conversation made no sense to him. He sighed and returned to his math notebook, into which he now absent-mindedly doodled circles. How he wished he could be part of any group. A tiny one would be enough. Maybe 3 people, or at least to have one real friend he could talk to and go out with. They could go swimming, ride bikes, or just hang around the housing estate, like he used to with Yirka. The involuntary memory of Yirka hurt, so he quickly pushed it away. His parents thought it was enough that he occasionally saw the kids from the congregation, but how could he be friends with them? The only thing they ever talked about was the Bible discussions during meetings. All the parents in the congregation kept their children on a short leash and certainly didn't let them hang out outside. Besides, those kids didn't even have time for that. They spent several hours a week doing service. That meant going around to strangers' houses and apartments, trying to start conversations about the Bible and similar topics with annoyed city residents. Fefin wasn't surprised people in this town didn't like Jehovah's Witnesses. They were annoying. Luckily, he didn't have to bother people himself, since his parents or the elders didn't require it of him yet. But to the outside world, he was still that Jehovah's kid. Suddenly, he remembered how his earlier comment had hurt his mother. If only she knew that he had now basically called her annoying too. "I'm a monster," he said aloud, and grabbed his head. After a while, another group of young people walked under the windows. They were the local punks who made Fefin's life miserable whenever he ran into them since he was a little boy. They mostly consisted of 3 guys he secretly called Long, Wide, and Sharp Eye. One was a tall, skinny guy, the second a stocky, fat one, and the third wore glasses with thick lenses. The trio was sometimes accompanied by other friends, but these 3 were the worst. He didn't even know whether they picked on him because his family were Jehovah's Witnesses or because they sensed fear in him. Since childhood, he had endured countless insults, name-calling, and later even a few punches from those bullies. Lately, every encounter with them ended with at least one hard jab to his ribs. His stomach turned and his body shivered. Thank God he wasn't outside. He'd rather spend time alone in his room than meet the trio outside. But soon after, his mother entered his room and asked him to take out the trash. Her voice was still cold. Fefin winced, even though he had promised himself he'd make peace with her. He wished it could happen under different circumstances. But what choice did he have? Refusing her request right now would be foolish. Besides, he hoped the trio had already left the area in front of their building. They didn't always hang out there. Maybe he'd get lucky this time. He put on his sweatpants, went to the kitchen, pulled the metal bin from the trash can, and with his heart in his stomach and a lump in his throat, left the apartment. He deliberately went down the stairs as slowly as possible. But when he reached the last step, through the transparent front door, he saw that, unfortunately, the trio was still there, occupying the entrance to their block. He sighed. He'd try to do it as quickly as possible, not giving them a chance. He opened the front door and tried to focus only on his footsteps. His heart was pounding. The boys were wearing baggy pants and hoodies with pictures and logos resembling the ones sold in skate shops. Or maybe they were knockoffs from the Vietnamese market. Fefin didn't know. For his family's standards, skate shops were too expensive, so he'd never even been inside one. He himself wore a plain white cotton t-shirt with no print and unbranded, faded sweatpants. He felt a little ashamed. At least it wasn't so hot anymore, and the sweaty circles under his arms had disappeared. He thought he could smell not only cigarette smoke, but something else, which he suspected might be marijuana. To him, both smells seemed tempting. They represented adulthood, coolness, and the attitude that you were above it all, that other people's rules didn't apply to you. Those were the values he secretly longed for. To his surprise, the boys didn't comment on his presence, neither when he walked past them, nor when he went down the steps toward the dumpsters. He sighed with relief. Now all he needed was for it to go the same way on his way back. By the recycling bins stood a small, skinny girl with large, heavy bags. She was pulling out one bottle after another, Fernet, Becherovka, or Cabernet, and they crashed loudly at the bottom of the green container. Fefin turned his head away from the scene and dumped his own trash into the bin. On the way back, he carried the empty container that still smelled of garbage, even though he had tried hard to scrape off the tiniest bits of vegetable and fruit peel from the bottom and sides. During the way, he lifted his head and quickly checked what was happening in front of the entrance. All the boys were staring directly at him. It startled him, and his heart and legs suddenly felt like stone. Act like nothing's wrong. You didn't notice them. They're not here. Just keep walking, he encouraged himself silently and focused on the shuffling of his slippers on the concrete sidewalk and steps. Inside, he was trembling with fear. When he was almost inside the building, just as he was opening the front door, he noticed a sudden movement to his right. It looked like someone was swinging their arms. He thought he was being attacked and fearfully crouched by the open door, but no blow came. "Awake," he heard instead, in a deliberately affected, velvety voice. Sharp Eye pulled 2 copies of the magazine, Awake, from under his sweatshirt and held them up as if offering them to passers-by. Fefin stood in the doorway for several seconds, staring blankly at the scene. Blood rushed to his head, and he couldn't think of a single thing to say in response to such a prank. So he let the door slam loudly and went home with a feeling of total humiliation and defeat because he hadn't managed to say or do anything. Even though he was back in his room, his heart couldn't stop pounding. He felt more hurt than if he had received an actual physical blow. Of course, his parents regularly stood by the stand with Jehovah's Witness magazines. The thought that people were laughing at them hurt more than if they had been laughing at him personally, especially when he remembered how he had spoken in front of his mother about how embarrassing the witnesses were, and how much that had hurt her. It hadn't hurt her that other people thought that way, but that he, her son, did. If only he could have said something sharp back to those boys, or if only he could at least manage to put the incident behind him. For many Jehovah's Witnesses, it was easy to deal with ridicule because they saw themselves as martyrs and were proud of their endurance against non-believers. But for Fefin, who couldn't help feeling ashamed of his community, it was extremely difficult to cope. Crushed by feelings of shame, embarrassment, and guilt, he wanted at least symbolically to show his mother some support. He went to the living room where his parents were and sat down in the creaky armchair. Without saying a word, he watched the TV news with them and planned to endure even the documentary during prime time. However, he changed his mind soon after, during the weather forecast, when the presenter Zakopchanik wished viewers sunshine in your soul. The velvety tone of the presenter's voice reminded Fefin of Sharp Eye's mocking imitation in front of the building entrance. He got up from the couch and went to his room, deciding he'd rather try solving a few more math problems. After 5 minutes, he gave up because he couldn't concentrate on them. Instead, he bent down under the bed and pulled out the men's magazine he had tossed there that afternoon. He opened it to the relevant page and kept repeating to himself the principles of picking up girls over and over, until he knew them by heart.